Hello everybody, Isabella from Bright Eye here again, and welcome to another instalment of our antique clothing from my collection. Today I have a real treat for you, no corset this time, but a early 90s, late 80s Victorian tea gown in silk velvet. Let me see if I can put some light on because it's a bit dim here, can't really appreciate it very well. Hold on. Ta-da! Better. Right, this is an original item obviously, and I purchased it to learn a little bit more about construction techniques and just see how things were constructed. So it's a very interesting bit. It's made in velvet, possibly cotton velvet actually. I don't think it's silk, but it's cotton velvet, and it's lined with just plain cotton. It is missing this part here, this skirt, that would be possibly a gathered placket. Gathering and ruching was very popular at that times. The top, obviously, it's nicely sort of done with two different kinds of satin, so it was definitely a budget gown. But here, as you can see, all you can see is the lining, and this is just not too showy for a tea gown. You wouldn't want your friends to see that. So you would have a panel that would hook and eye, or sort of actually use little naps here on one side and at the bottom. I'll get some close-ups in a second. And hook on the other side. There are some bars worked out for exactly that purpose. So it would cover that part here. It could be velvet, it could be white satin, it could be any other colour, to be honest, difficult to say. So let us have a look. I'm going to take off the camera from the stand so that you can see it a bit more. Okay, that's a little bit better, so you can get some close-ups. As you can see, the top is worked not very well in two different bits of satin lined with cotton. It's not noticeable at the first glance, but you can just see the difference in grain. This one is twill satin, this one is plain satin, better quality this one, using selvage at the front. And it closes with very fine hooks and eyes, and a worked bar when the hook was lost. So both aligned with the same fabric. Because they're lined with the same lining, it's possible that the maker basically utilised whatever they had available at the time, and if it didn't match, it was a tea gown. So, you know, should be nice, but it doesn't really matter much if it's not matching exactly wearing it indoors. It has a very cute little collar and sleeves, 3/4 length sleeves, gathered at the head quite nicely. So definitely looking at the beginning of 1890s and end of 1880s. The cuffs are shaped with just a little bit of pleating at the elbow, and they're finished with a nice twill tape. So all throughout there's quite a lot of machine stitching and hand stitching. I'll show you there you go, we have the original studs for putting up the panel. It is quite stained, so obviously it was worn. And the hem is very crude. Yep, that's it, that's the hemming of the front part. So if you ever are in a hurry and need to hem like that, there you go, authentic Victorian technique. And looking at the insides of the train, this is much better, but much nicely done. Obviously, as you can see here from the stitching, the velvet was first mounted on the cotton, utilising the usual standard Victorian technique of flat lining. And with velvet it is really difficult, not so much with cotton but with silk. You would be really sort of stitching it together first and basting it quite nicely to prevent it from moving. But then the edges were meticulously finished with hand stitching. So it stands in quite a contrast to the badly done hem of the lining and this, because this took time. The hem of the velvet part is much nicer done. And it's secured. The train especially, it's secured with a facing. So we have a nice velvet facing, very nicely worked by hand. Mostly nicely worked. It doesn't have any balayage, not really needed because it would be worn in-house, so not getting a lot of mud. It is a bit dirty, as you can see, but not mud, nothing like that. Also, interestingly, again, if you can use a selvage, use a selvage because it saves you a lot of hand stitching. So that's another technique that is used before, well, was used before and is used still. And you can just have a detail of the train. And let us have a look at the back, which is very nicely done. You can't see the seam opening on the shoulders and a little bit here, but they are the only sort of damages I've noticed so far. The cut is really beautiful. I mean, beautiful back. And the volume of the skirt is just hidden under the little tail of the peplum. And again, this is quite crudely done, just gathered with a really flimsy thread and just hang loose, not even attached. It's just hanging there. Obviously someone must have stepped on the train at some point because there is a bit of a repair here. So it must have ripped. And a bit of repair here, but apart from that, it's actually in pretty good nick. I used to have curtains in that colour when I was at uni. Well, I can't really get it very nicely on the horizontal, so I'm going to flip it to vertical just to give you a little bit of a view. And there it is in all its glory. The train is quite long and it looks stunning. It's very simple, there's no adornments, but the dressmaking and cut speaks for itself. Let us have a look from the side. There you go. Simple but very, very effective. So it would be nice, I possibly will be selling it, but it would be nice to see it, you know, reconstructed, added to the front panel and worn by a rather petite person. It's nice shaping. But before we finish, let me take it off the dummy and let us have a look inside the bodice, because it has a few interesting points as well. Oh, one more thing. It has a pocket. Completely forgot about it. But it has a very nice pocket set well into the back. And let us have a look what we can see underneath. Yep, there is a nice hand-stitched pocket. Ta-da! Right, the inside of the tea gown, very nicely done. Despite being a tea gown, it was still supposed to be worn on corsetry, maybe not particularly tight corsetry, but still a corsetry. So you would have a morning corset. And the bodice, it's all boned. Some bones, you can just see them peeping out again. They've cracked, they have sharp edges. And that's whalebone. Let's see if we can take it out, maybe not. It's quite secure here actually, I'll leave it as it is. The rest, again, the whalebone is cracked in several places and it's sticking out. It's another sharp edge. This actually doesn't look like whalebone, this looks like cellulite. So it might be celluloid bits. Another one, it looks quite lethal. There's a double one here. And a better one over there. Yeah, whalebone. It does have a very nice buckle and a waist stay. And you can see that that's been really worn with use. Very much worn with use, but they didn't really bother changing it. The buckle could do with a bit of a TLC, to be honest, but yeah, that's exactly where this was going, but it was holding up. The pleats, as I said, gathered on a very flimsy thread. But beautifully finished seam allowances everywhere else. Really lovely work, nicely formed. I think to restore it you'd have to really remove all of these, remove all the cracked boning, because it's cracked in several places and not particularly comfortable or possibly even dangerous to someone's skin or more. And it's exchanged. The arm sights, again, very nicely finished, stuck together and whipped together with a thread. Better. Collarless like me, it's really attached with quite jawless abandon, but it worked, so why not? And you can see how the front panels were sort of mounted on the lining, again with quite crude stitches. It's really loose, so it can be taken off at any time. But the hooks and eyes were mounted quite well and repaired several times, as you can see. It's a really fascinating piece of history. I hope you enjoy that. The pattern for a very similar gown is in my first book, The Victorian Dressmaker Volume 1. I think I'll be making a few more for my third instalment of the series. I just love tea gowns. How to be elegant and cozy at the same time, I suppose. Practicality and aesthetics combined. It's also interesting to see cotton velvet being used, because most of them would use silk velvet, but obviously cotton was a much more budget-friendly version. And at that time, cotton was mostly used in a sturdier version for furnishing. So this is definitely not the furnishing version. It just has quite a thin layer. So I hope you've enjoyed that and learned something, and I hope it will be useful to some of you who plan to make one of your own. So see you till next time.